to get us started.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this candidate forum hosted by the Belgrade Public Library and the Belgrade Communications Committee. I am Gina Coppins, chair of the Belgrade Communications Committee, and I'd like to welcome our candidates for tonight's forum. First of all, we have Maine House District 76 candidates, Deb Emery and Dan Newman, and Maine Senate District 17, Russell Black and Jan Collins. Brian Bopane will be our timekeeper. Anthony Wilson, Belgrade Town Manager, is the host on Facebook and Zoom. And Jay Bradshaw is our moderator. Jay is also the moderator for Belgrade's town meeting, so probably lots of you recognize him. So I'm going to turn it over to Jay.
Great, thanks, Gina. And thanks to our candidates for joining us this evening. Our goal for the next hour is that we will have the opportunity to meet the candidates. Belgrade has a tradition of doing these types of forums for many years, and we really view it as an opportunity to meet the candidates. It is not a debate. It is an opportunity for folks to get to know the folks who are running for office, serving our communities. And toward that, we've asked the candidates to start off with just a couple minutes to introduce themselves. We will then go through a series of questions that we have, and we've asked them to keep their responses to a minute. Brian Bopane, that Gina introduced, who's also a member of the Communications Committee, is our timekeeper. And as folks approach that time frame, Brian's just going to wave. We hope it's not necessary to go through any more than that, because we know that you all are good stewards with your time. So process-wise, all individuals are muted, but you're all welcome to send us questions, and there's a couple ways to do that. For those of you who are joining us on Zoom, please use the chat feature. Gina and I will be monitoring that, and we will be happy to present questions to the candidates. For those joining us on Facebook, please use the posting feature in Facebook, and Anthony will be monitoring that as well. We would ask that questions be limited to those that are likely to hit the 130th legislature. These are the issues that are going to be facing two of these candidates. And so we're not intentionally going to get into things like Supreme Court nominations, but we are going to get into issues that typically face the Maine legislature. And so we would just ask that you be mindful of that. Let's see, all participants are and will remain muted, as I already mentioned. And that's simply just to keep out extraneous background noises. One of the things that many of us have experienced with Zoom is it's very easy for background noises to take over control of the microphone. And so we want to avoid that to the extent possible. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the town's YouTube page and on Facebook as well. So let me just go down through the list, and let's start with Senator Russell Black and ask for Russ for you to do your introduction. Welcome. You need to unmute yourself, Russ.
Yeah.
Good evening. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you for having this forum tonight. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve the town of Belgrade in the last 2 years in the Senate. Before that, I was 8 years in the House, serving District 114 and District 112, which are in southern Franklin County. I have been involved in many civic organizations and business organizations over my career, over my business experience. I have served in the Wilton town office as a planning board member for 19 years. I was a selectman for 9 years there. I have lived in Wilton all my life. I've run several businesses. I am a farmer and a logger. I also ran a construction company for many years with as many as 13 employees. So I have signed both sides of the paycheck. I've received it and I've signed the back of one, and I've signed the paycheck going out. So I know how to budget. I've been involved in 5 state budgets. And that's, I think, is going to be very critical coming up this next session. It's going to be a challenge next session with the Corona-19 having affected our state revenues and with the state not being fully opened. And I think it's going to take an experienced person and a person that has signed both sides of the check in order to make the budget balance.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is that my time?
Yeah. Yep. If folks can folks on your screen see Brian, the candidates in particular, see him up there waving? If you can locate him. Okay. I can tell you where he is on my screen, but he could be different on yours. But okay, thanks. We will we'll get into the COVID-19 issue, obviously, because that's something that's near and dear to all of us. So we'll have time to come back to that in just a minute. Jan Collins, and you'll need to unmute yourself, Jan. We're not hearing her. Jan, if you can hear us, you're still muted on your end. There we go.
Hi.
There we go.
I'm a resident. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming. I am a resident of Wilton and a lifelong resident of Maine, a blueberry farmer, retired high school science teacher. I taught chemistry, physics, earth science, biology, etc. I'm a certified respiratory therapist and a Maine master naturalist and a grandmother. I've served on many boards, trusts, land trusts, committees, commissions, etc. What you should know about me is not all the things that I've done, but what is most important to me. I believe that everyone has value, that we are stronger as a community, a state, and a nation when we honor the contribution of each person and we support each other. I think there's some very clear differences between my opponent and myself. The reason why I'm running is because I feel that my opponent does not share the same values that I do and has made decisions that hurt us economically in this district. For instance, he voted against the minimum wage several times, minimum wage increases, at the same time as he voted 3 different times to cut the taxes on the wealthiest wage earners in the state of Maine. He voted against the Equal Rights Amendment that would have given women constitutional equal rights. He voted against marriage equality. I do not believe that the majority has the right to deny the civil rights of minorities. It is extremely important to me that we value everyone, that if somebody works a 40-hour week, they shouldn't have to get food stamps to feed their children. So I will be a supporter of workers. I will work for fair taxation for all so that we do not have an upside down tax system where the wealthiest pay the least. Thank you.
Thanks. I think because Jan did specifically mention Russell, we need to go back to give him an opportunity. I'm hoping we don't need to do this a lot, but I appreciate that it's important to present these distinctions. But what I'd like to do is to finish the introductions, and then we'll give Russell a few seconds to respond if he'd care to. Next on my list in no particular order is Dan Newman, who's a Republican running for the House. Dan?
Yeah, good evening. Thank you for having me, and thank you for everybody that's turned out to learn a little bit about all the candidates. I've been a Belgrade resident since mid-90s. I've been on the fire department since then. I've also spent at least going on 10 years on the select board. And I've also been on the budget committee for a little over 3 years in the town of Belgrade. I've been a business owner for many years. So I know budgets. I've worked on the budgets. We've worked on balancing budgets. I think with what's going on in the state right now and the fact that in the next 2 years, they're talking approximately $850 million shortfall. I think it's going to be important that we have somebody that works with budgets or knows how to budget, whether it be with town government or as a business, to be able to decide between wants and needs. We may have to take some of the things that the state would like to do and put them on hold, not necessarily get rid of them, but we may have to put some things on hold and stick to things that necessarily have to be done: bridge maintenance, roads maintenance, schools. We have to support the schools and make sure we're funding them correctly because of all the precautions they're having to take with the COVID. It's going to be a lot of extra costs for the schools, so we have to support our teachers and our educators. My wife and I have been married for 30 plus years. I've raised 2 daughters that are both registered nurses, so I do know some of the healthcare issues that are going on. The elderly healthcare issues with funding and insurance. It's personal to me at this point. So thank you.
Thanks, Dan. And Deb Emery. And you need to unmute yourself, Deb. There we go.
I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Oh. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me this evening. I've lived in Wayne for 39 years, and my husband Peter and I have raised our 3 children. My oldest is a daughter, and she's a doctor in Camden, living with her son, who's a social worker. I have 2 sons living in Wayne. One is a farmer working with his wife and 3 children, and my other son is a builder, and his wife is a nurse. So we cover the small business challenges, and we cover the healthcare in our family discussions and in our lives. Over the past years, I have been a school principal, a teacher, a principal, and a superintendent. So I do know how to work with budgets. I know how to negotiate. I know how to problem solve with families, with school boards, with teachers, and with teachers' unions. I've built a career based on a commitment to care for families, for taxpayers, and for children. And I've worked with families in crisis and solved problems with the unions. I've faced budget crisis while still maintaining quality education for students. And I know how to solve problems and find solutions. In 2006, I was fortunate to be named Maine's Principal of the Year, the National Distinguished Principal Award, and I traveled to Washington and met with our legislative delegation to have deep conversations about Maine and the Maine schools. In the community, I've served on the Russell Medical Center Board, and I presently serve as Vice President on Healthy Communities of the Capital Area that supports multiple needs of the aging population, as well as teens, youth, and the impoverished. Many of our decisions have to be guided by what the people need. We can't think about it any other way. What's most important is our human beings. And I love this district. We have a lot to do, and we have a lot of chances to do it. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Deb. Russ, I said I'd go back because Jan made some specific comments. Did you have anything that you wanted to just add in before we get into our questions? And you will need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, I'd like to respond to the one specific issue, the minimum wage. I realized that the minimum wage was too low and it should have been raised, but the reason I voted against it was that the steps were too large, I thought, and too fast for small businesses. I had a lot of small businesses that was talking to me, and they said that they couldn't survive. And in fact, some of them did close afterwards, especially some small variety stores. I would have liked to have seen in that bill, which we didn't get a chance to amend, I would have liked to see a training wage for students. I would have liked to see a student wage and perhaps even an agricultural wage. And I have businesses today that hire students in the summer, and by the time they get them trained, the summer's over. And so I had a lot of businesses that was asking me to go slower, and that's why I didn't support that minimum wage. even though I believe that the minimum wage was too low and it should have been increased. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Well, so I think one of the things that has affected all of us for the last 6 months is the coronavirus. And I'm interested, I know it's a deep topic, but I'm interested in your thoughts on how you feel the COVID-19 pandemic has been managed in Maine. This time I'm going to start with Deb Emery. And a reminder, you'll need to unmute yourself. And you're still muted, Deb. So there we go. So just for the couple of ways to easily unmute yourself is either clicking on the icon in the lower left-hand corner or pressing the space bar on your keyboard. Either one of those should work for you. Okay, Deb, COVID-19.
Well, first off, I think the governor's #1 responsibility is the safety of its citizens. So I think she took that very seriously. And if we look at the end result, we're the second, in quotes, healthiest state in the nation right now in terms of our numbers. Certainly we're increasing presently, but throughout the summer, the balance between the restrictions and the reopening of our economy seemed to keep us the healthiest that we could. It's a tough balance trying to keep the economy running smoothly when you have a pandemic, and we've never had to deal with that before. What I'd personally like to see is more public service announcements. I'd like to see more information going out to our citizens about how we can rein this in, because I think if we could instill the mask wearing, I think the CDC director said that if we all wore masks, in 12 days, we could lower our numbers. And I think if we could all commit to that for the public health. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Dan? Same question. Dan Newman. Gotcha.
All right. Overall, I think the state's done well. I think the governor did what she had to do on many of the things. I would like to have seen a little more clarification. I started off, when all this started off, I still work through all of it with the company that I actually work for. For the first 2 months, it was nobody pushed wearing masks, nobody really advised wearing masks. And then when things started to open back up, it became everybody should be wearing masks. So it's like we had a moving target all the time. Clean surfaces when you touch anything, and then, well, it really doesn't matter if you clean surfaces. Social distancing, go to Walmart, but don't go to church and social distance. It seems like there's been way too many contradictory things as part of this. I'd like to have seen more consistency. I'd like to have seen after approximately 30 to 60 days that the state got together and created a group of people to turn around and make more decisions rather than just unilateral ones from the governor.
Thanks. Jan Collins?
Thank you. I have generally applauded Dr. Shara and Governor Mills' science-based approach to COVID-19 restrictions. I think the proof is in the pudding. We are the second safest state, healthiest state in the nation. So who's going to argue with that? As a result of those choices, we have a better economy than most other states. We haven't been hit quite as bad, and our unemployment numbers, although they're not where we want them to be, and they're not great, they are still much better than other places. However, the one area that I feel we did not take the precautions we needed to was with county jails, because county jails are an entity unto themselves with very little supervision. Many jails did not choose to follow the protocols as outlined by the Department of Corrections. And we did need to have, they were placing not only the inmates who were in a fishbowl, but the community at risk. Thank you.
And Russell Black, same question.
Say that.
There we go.
Yeah. Is it possible to take the restriction off so I can, unmute easier?
You should be able to do that however you'd like.
Yeah, and we're not being able to do that. But
You
anyway,
can't, just from a technical standpoint, you're not able to unmute yourself?
it doesn't seem to. I keep pressing it, and it.
So just leave it off. Just don't mute yourself. That's
Okay.
fine.
Overall, I think that the governor has done a relatively good job with handling the pandemic from a health perspective. But I do think that there was a lack of communication and opportunities for more people to weigh in. I think it was a very small group of people that was making all the decisions. I think leadership in the legislature could have been involved. I think business people could have been involved. Healthcare people could have been involved more. And as Dan said, Dan made some real good points about the inconsistencies, enforcement. A lot of people are still confused. The area that was really affected me, and the number of calls I got and emails was the unemployment. Department of Labor was a total failure for 6 or 8 weeks. I mean, I'm still getting emails and calls of people that haven't got their unemployment yet. 8 weeks into it, unemployed self-employed people could still not, they didn't even have the software done 8 weeks into the pandemic. They had people that were answering calls that weren't trained off the street. So that was a big problem on the unemployment, and we dealt with it daily, hundreds of calls. That was a serious problem.
So thank you, Russ. Let me ask a follow-up, because I mean, one of the issues with regard to the pandemic was that I know the 129th legislature had to leave very suddenly around St. Patrick's Day, and what to do with the remaining bills has been an issue. I guess not for you, since you were part of the 129th, but also I'm interested in the thoughts of the other candidates. So how do you see this going? I mean, if the restrictions with gatherings continue, how will the state deal with the challenges of a $500 million budget shortfall for this fiscal year, and conclude the business that was just left on the table when things shut down in March? So Russ, your thoughts about, I know it's been a hot topic in terms of come back, don't come back. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts were, in fact, I voted not to come back unless it was Corona-19 related issues, only a defined agenda. But also in that voting no, not to come back in, I didn't think it was right for the legislature to come back and gather when the state was not opened up again. I mean, we would have had to rent the Civic Center, a lot of added expense paying us. We would have had 300-400 people in a combined area. I didn't think it was safe, either. And I'm concerned about what they're going to do come January. Not only with what right now. We departed on the 17th of March. The legislature voted unanimously to sign a die. We did everything the last few days that we needed to keep the state running, all the emergency actions. We gave the governor executive power, and there's nothing really that needs to be done between now and January, except if we went in and did, opened up the state of that, issues around Corona-19. And the governor has the power to call us back tomorrow if she needs us. She can call us back tomorrow. That's in her hands. It's up to her. If she needs us, we can go in immediately.
So since the other candidates weren't part of the legislature, I'd like to twist the question just slightly with regard to how would you prioritize the challenges that are going to be facing the 130th? I mean, I saw one estimate that if the 130th comes back in January, in 6 months, there needs to be a plan to address a $500 million shortfall in the second half of the year. I mean, we all, I think there's complete agreement that, wants versus needs is really important, but I guess where the rubber meets the road is, what are the priorities? What are the things that you think absolutely should be on the table? And what are the things that you think should be absolutely protected, to the extent that there are absolutes in any of them? Let me continue down the line with Jan, and then Russ, I'll circle back to you on that question as well. So Jan Collins, and you got to unmute yourself. Sorry, thank you. There we
Jay,
go.
I wonder if you could allow us to answer the same question that Russell had.
Sure, I'd be
Before we
glad
go on
to.
to the question
Sure.
about the budget.
Absolutely. The only issue there was that Russell was part of it, but absolutely, if you'd like to comment on it, because Russell was part of the legislature and they left. But please feel free to. You're more than welcome to comment on it, and then please.
Thank you. I would love the opportunity. I would love the opportunity to both answer that question and the question about the budget.
Please
So
do.
first of all, the Republicans spent a lot of time complaining about not being called back to the legislature, and then when given the opportunity to do so, they refused. And along with that, my opponent has also sent out a newsletter complaining that they left 400 bills on the table when he had an opportunity to deal with those. Secondly, the legislature has been doing work during the pandemic. And the way they're doing that is by using Zoom. So they have committee meetings. The committee meetings have looked over bills. The committee meetings have made decisions about bills. So it isn't that the legislature hasn't been doing work during this time. I just want that to be clear. Work has been going on. Committees have been meeting. And I think that there is certainly a way to do that in the future without having to rent the Civic Center. I believe that opening, and those meetings were open to the public, so the public could listen to those, and when the opportunity was given to sign up for testimony, they could give testimony as well. I do not think that we have to call halt to the legislature. Thank you.
And did you want to talk about your priorities for dealing with the shortfall?
If anybody else wants to answer this question first, I'd be glad to go on to the priorities for the shortfall.
Oh, I see. You're okay. We could do that. Dan, did you want to speak to the manner in which the legislature has been functioning?
Well, I just don't know enough about it
Okay.
at this point without being part of the legislature. So, I mean,
Thank you.
trying to second guess isn't something I really want to do.
That's fair. Deb, would you
I
care to
agree.
comment?
We're in uncharted waters with all of these decisions this summer, so I'm fine with passing right now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, then let me tee up a different question since we went that path. What are your top priorities facing as we're facing the challenge of Maine's economy? And what specific proposals would you bring to the state legislature to address the challenges? And so I'm seeing this as a sort of a two-part. One part is you got $500 million that's got to be cut someplace. The budget has to be balanced. So that's got to happen. And then going forward, we know that the fiscal impact of this is going to continue for a while. So please be as specific as you're able about the top couple of priorities and the things that, quite frankly, you think are ripe for cutting. And let me work backwards this time. Deb, I'll start with you since you're right on my screen.
Certainly, thank you. For me, it's always going to be about the people and the human beings. And I think we're going to have to look at our healthcare. 14,000 people lost their healthcare benefits just between, I think, March and June. We're going to have to look at employment and housing and food insecurity, and also supporting our small businesses. It's a ripple effect. It affects everything. I think we need to stabilize our businesses and our employers. We received $1.25 billion from the CARES Act, which is being distributed, but hopefully there'll be another federal supplement that Maine can distribute to help the businesses. I think we also have to invest in our infrastructure. When I talk to real estate agents, properties are selling here. People are coming here, and they're coming here with their children and their work. So we have to make sure that our roads, our broadband, all of that is prepared for them so they can be successful. Thank you.
Thanks. Dan?
All right. Basically, priority is going to be small businesses, helping small businesses grow. We've got to increase the tax base to have the revenue come in to cover the shortfall. If not, we are going to have to cut some programs. I don't know all the programs that are out there. I don't know what was proposed last year that never went through in the legislature when they had to leave the session. But basically, we've got to find a way to cover this shortfall and balance the budget. We know we're going to have to take care of anything to do with infrastructure that's emergency, any bridges that are falling down, anything that's major repairs. We may have to push back some paving projects and some things that aren't necessarily top priority. We need to find a way to help with the insurance. You know, when people lose their jobs and things like this, how can they keep their insurance and be affordable? I'd like to see a way for more businesses to encourage health savings accounts, which actually should be able to be used for up to 6 months after you leave a job to help pay for your insurance costs. Things like that.
Thanks. Jan?
Thank you. The LePage administration cut taxes to Maine's highest income earners 3 times over 8 years. State budgets continued to rise. To make up the gap in income, Governor LePage shifted those costs to municipalities. Property taxes went up, as did the tax burden for low and middle income earners. Fair and equitable taxes will allow us to provide for those negatively affected by the COVID-19 crisis and allow us to invest in education and infrastructure that will hasten Maine's economic recovery. Currently, the topmost wage earners have the lowest tax burden. This is a revenue problem. It needs a revenue solution. We found with the last downturn, when we decided we would cut instead, it meant that our economy slowed to a crawl, that we in Maine were the 4th slowest to recover from that downturn. We need to make fair taxes, which means raising the taxes on the people who can most afford to pay them. Thank you.
Thanks. Russell?
I think we need to take a hard look at everything in the budget. I will be prepared to work with colleagues on both sides of the aisle. I've done that in the past and evaluate what we need to do, prioritize and identify common solutions that we can work together as both parties. I was one of the few in my caucus to vote for Medicare expansion. I voted for it 3 times against the former administration. So I supported that. I reached across the aisle many times on environmental issues. So I'm looking to work with my other colleagues on the other side of the aisle to identify problems. I think we need to get our small businesses up and going, get those people back off unemployment and back on where they can get health care from businesses. I think infrastructure, as some of the other candidates have already mentioned, are going to be crucial in doing that. Broadband is going to be crucial because we've got many people that have moved here from out of state and they're staying. They're not leaving, and they need to be able to work from home. Many more people are working from home, and they're going to need good quality broadband to do that. And our roads and bridges are falling apart in rural Maine, and I'm concerned about how we're going to be able to expand businesses and tourism and all kinds of things in rural Maine if our roads continue to fall apart. And that has been one area where the legislature has not been stepping up to the plate and putting money into. I mean, we've done the bonding and we've got the gas tax, but the gas tax is outdated, and we really need to come up with a solution. And it would, some of us had talked about that we really could, if we took the $200 million that we get from new car sales and put that to the highways and bridges, that would fill that gap. But of course, that means if you take $200 million from there, then you've got to build something back into the budget to cover that.
Thank you. I would say since you just touched upon healthcare as one of the significant issues for many individuals and families, small businesses, entrepreneurs, and especially rural hospitals, the healthcare system it's a significant burden. What solutions do you think could be implemented by the state of Maine to address these solutions? And Russ, I'll start with you, and we'll work our way back.
Well, I think, we've already addressed some, with Medicare expansion. The problem is we added the 14,000 that came on unemployment, and we've got to be able to get them into the system. We've got to get them back to work so that they can go back on their business health cares where they were. Some of them are going back already. I guess I would work with the legislature and try to find the best solutions to get them back on some kind of health care. Get their jobs back, and some of them will fall into the Medicare expansion.
Okay, Jan?
Thank you. That's a very good question. As you probably know, there are 2 hospitals in Maine right now that are in receivership because they are unable to pay their bills. We also know, as Russell has mentioned, that many people have lost their healthcare coverage. There are several things that people can do. They can apply for Medicaid, and they can apply to the health insurance marketplace for subsidized health insurance. But the most expensive insurance premiums often fall to those in the near retirement age. This is an issue nationally as well and could be remedied by allowing people 55 to 65 to buy into Medicare. Along with that, we need to change some of our practices so that people are rewarded for healthy choices, and managed care helps people to become healthy who already have healthcare problems. That would reduce the cost of care. In addition, we need to make sure that, okay, thank you, bye.
Thanks, Dan. Sorry, a minute goes by very quickly, I know. Dan, your thoughts on the healthcare?
Well, I don't know a lot about the healthcare, what the state's proposing, and any of the issues that are going on at this point in the state. I do know that they need to find ways for people to keep their healthcare if they lose a job or leave a job. You should be able to continue to maintain your healthcare for so many months without having to go out and buy expensive healthcare. I also don't think you should have to lose your healthcare or when you're trying to get more new healthcare. I don't like pre-existing conditions stipulations where you're going to pay a lot more money if you have pre-existing condition, or you can't get health insurance at all to cover that. There's got to be ways for the state to look at that and try to control some of these insurance companies. I just don't know a good way to do it yet. I've got to get in and start reading some of the proposals that are going on in the state at this point.
Thanks, Deborah.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to look at this from a different viewpoint and think about how much the hospitals provide for us. 8 out of the 16 counties, the hospitals are the largest employer. So we have to make sure that as we're working through this COVID crisis, that we're making the right decisions for our hospitals. 40% of our Americans actually are delaying services, and that's causing tremendous stress on our hospitals because they can't bring in that revenue that they need. We're going to have, we'll be using some buying power to access testing equipment and PPE equipment, proper cleaning supplies, and also supporting our patients with supplies and food and transportation so that they can get the care they need. I'm with all of you in that we have to really look at healthcare. We have to have a citizenry with healthcare. Thank you.
Thanks. I would just, I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to acknowledge that the current reimbursement levels under Medicaid and Medicare are actually part of the problem. So the couple of the issues that affect hospitals and emergency medical services and primary care providers is that Medicare and Medicaid don't come close to covering the cost. And I know that's a huge issue, but when we look at the rural hospitals in particular, the loss of those hospitals would be absolutely tragic. You know, somebody did point out that, you know, we've really tried to stick to the 1-minute format, but acknowledging that's just really hard to do. So I'd like to suggest we've only got about 15 minutes left. Maybe we'll be a little bit less tight on that 1 minute, but if we can use the time to be as absolutely specific as possible, that would be really very helpful. And with that in mind, you know, one of the big budget things that impact the budget is the cost of education. And so I'm interested in your thoughts on how the state should go forward with regard to school funding in light of the impact of COVID-19. Many districts have had to take on extra staff. They've gone through retrofitting of their plants, their facilities to try and accommodate distancing and multiple platforms. And that falls to the district. How do you think the state could go forward to help municipalities with that? And I'll go back and start with Russell at this point. And Russell, you're muted.
There you go.
There we go.
Yeah, okay. Well, education is extremely important. You know, and even more so now that some of the kids are in hybrid models or, you know, in school. Education is going to be a critical thing moving forward. The last budget, I voted for a $80 million increase from the state to go to education. That was part of the budget. I was just one of 4 Republican senators that voted for the governor's budget. And one reason I did that was because it sent $80 million. I don't see how we can cut education. I do know that, you know, $49 million has gone into it this summer from the PPE. And, you know, $20 million went into it in June from the federal government to cover some of their costs. The state budget is going to utilize, you know, a lot of this federal money. The governor and is utilizing a lot of this federal money to get through till next June at the end of the budget. You know, it's going to be tough for the next biennium budget. That's when we're going to really have to look at it when we don't have federal dollars to help us out. And that's at that point we're going to have to work together as bipartisan as we can and make sure education is continually funded at the proper level.
Dan?
Thank you. The state has yet to meet its obligation of 55% of the funding for education. We've come closer, but we haven't made it yet, even though the people of the state of Maine voted to have it so. There are a couple of things that are economic drivers. One of them is education, the other is infrastructure. Although the legislature has not honored the funding of 55% of the state's share of education, that has meant that local taxes have had to go up to make the difference. I believe that one of the other things that my opponent voted against, but seems to be really in favor of now, is the broadband, because many of the people who live in rural Maine do not have broadband service and therefore cannot make their educational goals. They can't connect. So the days that they're not in school, they neither have a hotspot or do they have broadband service to reach the teacher with. So we really do need to put money into infrastructure. That's the second part of economic development. If we make that investment, we will be sure to have a much better economic recovery. Thank you.
Dan?
School funding is going to have to be one of the top priorities. The costs definitely have gone up with teachers trying to teach online, plus having some schools having to hire additional teachers to come in and teach in school, in classroom. All of the PPE costs, cleaning costs, everything's gone up. So that's going to have to be one of the main priorities when you're looking at this budget. I don't think you're ever going to be able to cut it. Broadband, as people have said, even here in Belgrade, I'm on the Zoom meetings for the select board, and I'll end up getting knocked off the internet. I don't know if there's anything the state can do with the providers to find out why certain times of day they throttle back their broadband. I know they have a lot of usage, but they need to increase the infrastructure to be able to handle the increased use of it that we're having right now. I mean, it's just, I'm not really sure without, starting to look at all these school budgets. I know Mesolonsky's budget went up $170,000 last year, this last time when we voted on it. People have come to me and said, why has it gone up when they didn't have school at the end of the season? Well, they still had to do all the cleaning. They had to do all the prep. They had to order all the supplies, increase staff. It's going to be a balancing act.
Thank you. Deb?
Yes, one of the things I think we will have to do, because as you would imagine, education is a priority for me, but I think it's worth taking a really hard look at the essential programs and services funding model and really picking that apart, making sure it's doing exactly what we need to in this new age where students are learning remotely, and identifying those key components. And I agree with the others that the ripple effect of COVID has impacted every budget line in a school: transportation, cleaning, staffing. But there's savings to be found there, because if students are learning remotely, they're not being transported. So we just are all going to have to sit at the table and identify what we have for challenges in the budget, but also figure out how we can all participate. I know in Wayne, they were able to find a $40,000 savings for Wayne from the school budget when they shut down in March. So I think we can work together, and that's the key to going back. When we go back as a legislature, we have to figure out how to take everyone's opinion, listen, sit at the table, and try to solve these problems for the benefit of our priority, which is our people.
Thanks. Coming up on our closing few minutes, I've got just a few questions that I'd like to put forward, and to the extent that you could keep it super brief, that would be really good. One of them is the CMP corridor. I don't intend to have this be an expanded discussion of a very complex case, but I'm just really interested in your view on the CMP corridor. And Deb, let's start with you this time.
Sure. When I've talked to people in our district, they are not in favor of it. They don't see it as any support for Mainers. The savings are cents on a dollar, cents each month, not even quantifiable. And it's highly unlikely the employees would be permanent workers. So I would vote against it because that's how my constituents feel.
Thanks, Dan. The CMP corridor.
CMP corridor, I don't know a lot about it. What I've looked at, I think it's going to create some problems with environmental impacts. I don't mind power lines coming through existing corridors, but clearing out new areas, losing wildlife habitat, and causing erosion problems, especially coming down through that area with all the rivers and streams. I don't think it's a real good idea. I think the state didn't negotiate a good enough amount of money or benefits to justify it. And the fact that we're trying to bring low cost energy down to Massachusetts, and yet the state of Massachusetts, the voters down there voted not to allow the natural gas to come up to southern Maine to help bring in the low cost natural gas. I don't think did us any favors. So basically I'm against it also.
Thanks. Jan?
Thank you. So the argument for CMP is that it will save energy and contribute to stopping global climate change. However, there is no evidence of that that's been made. We haven't even had an environmental impact statement for the project. And what we know about what has happened in Canada shows that it clearly is not an environmental project. Just one of the impoundments in Canada, the St. James Bay project, actually drowned forests the size of New York State. That means that all those trees are no longer absorbing CO2. Instead, they're releasing methane from decomposition under the water. They're also contributing mercury, accumulating in the waterways, so that the indigenous peoples who would normally have depended on fishing there can no longer eat the fish. Shallow waters in these impoundments have increased heat absorption in the water and affected the offshore waters and the marine life there. There is no evidence that there will be enough power production for current users and new contracts. And that's not even talking about the devastation of the undeveloped areas in Maine. So it's a bad project and we should not have it. Thank you.
Thank you. Russell, same question.
Yes, 2 years ago, about this time, I was one of the first people to speak out against a corridor. We had a hearing, the first hearing at University of Maine when the proposal first came forward, and I said it was a bad deal then. I say it's a bad deal today. I have sponsored legislation. This legislation is still pending to revoke the permit across public land, which was my bill, came out of my committee, unanimous. I co-sponsored a bill with Senator Carson to stop the project until we had a more environmental study done. It's a bad deal. You know, it's gonna go, it's the in my district, you know, Franklin County, Somerset County, the biomass industry will be gone if this power corridor goes through. I mean, there's already congestion on the line. They have trouble now getting the power to Massachusetts. This is just gonna make their power too expensive and too much congestion on the line. A lot of mills like Isaacson Lumber in Livermore, some of the loggers in Franklin County will lose a third of their employees. One logger has 100 workers, mainly trees. And he said if this corridor goes through, he'll have to lay off 30%, you know, a third of his employees because they're involved in trucking of the waste materials to Reenergy and Stratton. Reenergy and Stratton takes 25.
Looks like we just, Russell, you got cut off there towards the end. I think the internet connection froze temporarily. All right, two last quick questions. Would you support or oppose Maine joining the National Popular Vote Compact? And for those who are not perhaps familiar with that, the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact is an agreement among a group of U.S. states and the District of Columbia to award all of the electoral votes to whichever presidential candidate wins the overall popular vote in the 50 states and the District of Columbia. The compact is designed to ensure that the candidate who receives the most votes nationwide is elected president, and it would come into effect only when it would guarantee that outcome. There needs to be enough states signed on to the compact to achieve the 270 electoral votes needed to win the presidency. 16 states with a total of 190 electoral college votes have signed on to the compact. This bill was introduced in the last legislature and is likely to come back in the next one. So I guess what I'd like to do is just go through and get your thoughts, thumbs up, thumbs down. Would you support or oppose Maine joining the compact? And let's start with Russell.
I would oppose it. I voted against it. I believe that the way we've always elected our president in the past is the way we should continue.
Okay, thank you. Jan?
I would support it. I believe that the American people always thought that this was how it worked, that the majority got to choose the president. As I said before, a minority of people should not have the power over the majority in this case. And what is also true is that this, the only way that this works is for a majority of people to vote for the president. And isn't that what we want? Isn't that what a democracy is about? One person, one vote? Yes, I'm in favor.
Dan?
I haven't read it, but from what I have seen, I'd be against it. I don't like the fact that the idea of having large states like California and New York, basically with a larger population, be able to dictate who's going to be president. If a smaller state is against that, I think the way that we've always done it seems to work better.
Thanks. Deb?
I would be in favor of the popular vote compact. I think every person's vote needs to count.
Thanks. Last question. This ought to be a super quick question. If you're successful in getting in, what would be your preferred committee assignment? I'll start with Deb.
Well, probably everyone would want me on the education committee.
And where would you want to be? Yes.
And I would be willing to do that, but I think that it would be, I would be very interested in infrastructure, broadband, and working on those projects.
Thanks. Dan?
Obviously being on the fire department, public safety interests me quite a bit. I would like to be on something to do with the health and insurance aspect of it, just because some of it's kind of personal to me at the moment. But I'll go where people need me. I want to work with everybody, and I won't insist that I go somewhere in particular.
Thanks, Jan.
I have a hard time whittling down which committee I want to be on, but I think taxation is really, really important. I would like to be on taxation. I'd also like to be on the budget committee.
Great. And Russell?
Well, I am serving where I think that I can do the most benefit for my constituents, being a rural county, largely covered with farms and forests, so the Ag, Conservation and Forestry Committee. My dream committee would be IF&W, if I could get on that, just because that's my passion. But my expertise would be with Ag and Forestry.
Thank you. Well, we've gone for just a smidge over an hour, but I would like to give the candidates just a minute to, if you'd like to make any closing statements. And Russell, you're right, prominently displayed on my computer right now, so I'll start with you.
Well, thank you for allowing us to have this time this evening to express our views on certain issues. It's been an honor to serve you the last 2 years. I would like to have that privilege to do it another 2 years. I think that I'm the best qualified to do that, having experience and can hit the job running day one. There's a lot that we need to do. My priorities would be making sure that rural Maine is well represented in the legislature, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I would be willing to work across the aisle with my colleagues on the other side to get compromise and make sure things move forward. So thank you again for having us.
Thank you. Jan?
Again, thank you so much for having us. I think what I will bring to the legislature is my commitment to being there every single day, that it will be my full-time job. And as a full-time job, I will make sure that I am also keeping in contact with my constituents, going to not only to town meetings, but having town meetings myself in each of the areas of the state, or sorry, not of the state, but of our district, so that I can hear what the constituents feel is most important to them. I feel strongly that we have some very big issues in front of us in order to ensure that our state is able to recover quickly from the COVID-19 pandemic. And I have a deep understanding of the complexity of the issues and am willing to put that to work to make sure that we come out of this quickly and safely. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. Dan?
I just want to thank you, everybody, for hosting us. It's been an informative night. I've actually get to learn about some of the other candidates that I didn't know as much about. As a part of the select board in Belgrade, I've been working with other people as a team for many, many years to come together to create budgets, work through issues at a local level. I think I can expand on that going to the state when I'm elected. And I just want everyone to know that I'm more than willing to work with all parties and listen to all ideas. I may not always agree with you, but if you can convince me that your idea is better than mine or works and mine doesn't, I'm more than happy to entertain that.
Thanks, Dan. Deb?
Thank you all. I know that I can work across the aisle. I know how to problem solve. I've worked across the country with teachers and professional development and have been able to guide and lead. And I know that I can make a difference for the citizens of this great district. There are a couple issues we didn't bring up tonight that are will be on the table as well, and that's elder care and our opioid crisis. And the pandemic has made it very big, had big struggles for those people. The loneliness, the isolation, the lack of medical support and mental health care. And those are all passions. But one of the things I always did as an administrator is I sent out newsletters. I always communicated, and I will continue to do that. That's how we talk, and that's how we meet. And we always will have opportunities to be together, because when it comes right down to it, I'm your representative and I listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I turn it over to Gina, I want to thank you all for joining us. I know that Zoom is a wonderful platform because it allows us to get together easily. It's also a challenging platform because we've got the technological issues and the timing. I feel like we barely scratched the surface. I think we got some good questions answered, but boy, it is tremendously complex, and the issues that are going to be facing the 130th legislature, who knows what's going to happen. So for my part, thank you for the opportunity to participate in this. And with that, let me turn it over to Gina Coppins.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all the candidates for making time in your busy schedule to participate in the forum. It was really informative. And I also want to thank the audience for attending the forum too. It's really important that we learn about our candidates. And thanks to Jay Bradshaw for doing a great job moderating, and Brian Beaupain for being our timekeeper, and Anthony for doing a good job with the technology. I'm going to turn it over to Anthony because he just has a few words to say about casting your vote either by absentee or in person when it comes to Belgrade.
Right. So people have been coming to the town office for weeks now, requesting ballots, and we anticipate receiving those from the state this week, and they will be available for people to pick up, or we'll be mailing them to people who've requested that beginning on Monday. If you want to come to the town office and pick up a ballot, you'll have the opportunity to cast your ballot right there at the town office. And we are encouraging that because it is the most efficient way. And you'll know when you hand that ballot back over to a clerk that it has been received. So the town office obviously is located at 990 Augusta Road. We're open from 8 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. each weekday and until 7 p.m. on Thursdays. And we will have a couple of evenings where we are just doing voting. And so if you have any questions, you are welcome to contact us either through our Facebook page or on our website at townofbelgrade.com. We also have great voting information at townofbelgrade.com/voting. And I did want to read one comment that was put on the Facebook page. We did not have any questions on the Facebook page, but one of our Sunnier residents who's always very positive about everything, but she said, I hope we can do this again in the future. How very helpful this is.
Nice.
Great.
Well, thanks all.
Thank
be
you.
safe. Thank you for your participation in our process, and we'll look forward to talking with you later.
Good night, everyone.
Have a good evening.
Night all.
Ready for the